In an unprecedented clash between the executive branch and the judiciary, President Trump set his sights on a federal judge. But the judge's unexpected response left the nation in shock. It wasn't just another headline. It was the kind of confrontation that forced Americans to pause, question, and look closer at the balance of power in their democracy. When Trump publicly lashed out at U.S. District Judge James Boasberg over his ruling to halt a controversial deportation effort, the world watched as tensions soared beyond the courtroom and straight into the heart of political warfare. The president, known for his unfiltered outbursts and fierce defense of executive power, believed he could bulldoze yet another roadblock with sheer pressure. But this time, the judge didn't flinch. This wasn't just about immigration or law. It was about the very core of judicial independence and the quiet, steely power that can shake even the loudest voices in government. News cameras captured Trump's fiery statements, denouncing the judge as politically motivated, hinting at deep state agendas, and accusing the justice system of being stacked against him. Supporters cheered, critics gasped, and the media stormed into overdrive. Meanwhile, inside a quiet federal courtroom, a judge remained calm, calculated, and ready. He wasn't going to play the political game, but what he did next would speak louder than any rally chant or tweet. This isn't just a legal story, it's a showdown. One man with a gavel, another with a global spotlight, and both ready to stand their ground. As the footage rolls, Trump pointing fingers, Boasberg entering the courtroom. The stage is set. What follows is a twist even Trump didn't see coming. And it all begins here, with a fight that just might redefine the limits of presidential power. Judge James Boasberg isn't a name most Americans recognized before this high-stakes confrontation, but within legal circles, he's long been respected as a sharp, measured, and principled jurist. Appointed to the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia by President Obama in 2010, Boasberg has built a reputation for fairness and a deep commitment to the Constitution. Before that, he served as a judge on the D.C. Superior Court and worked as an assistant U.S. attorney. He also became chief judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, overseeing some of the nation's most sensitive intelligence operations. Notably, he has presided over several high-profile cases, including matters related to government surveillance, Native American land rights, and now, a deeply controversial immigration ruling that has propelled him into the national spotlight. Known for his meticulous legal reasoning, Boasberg isn't one to be swayed by political pressure, a trait that would soon be tested like never before. At the center of the storm is the Alien Enemies Act, a law passed in 1798 during a time of global instability and fear of foreign infiltration. Originally intended to allow the president to detain and deport nationals of hostile countries during times of war, it has rarely been invoked in modern American history. That changed when President Trump used it to authorize the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants, claiming they posed a threat to national security due to alleged gang affiliations. The move, announced as part of a sweeping executive order, ignited immediate legal challenges. Critics pointed out that the U.S. is not officially at war with Venezuela, and that the law, more than 200 years old, was being weaponized for political purposes. Supporters, however, praised the president for taking bold action against what they described as unchecked migration and national security risks. Trump's immigration stance has always been defined by hardline policies and bold rhetoric. From building a border wall to enforcing controversial family separation policies, his administration consistently pushed the boundaries of executive authority in immigration enforcement. He promised to put America first, and to many of his supporters, that meant cracking down on illegal immigration by any means necessary. Yet, these same actions often sparked outrage, court battles, and international criticism. The use of the Alien Enemies Act marked a new chapter in this ongoing saga, an escalation that blended historical legislation with modern political ambition. It wasn't just about stopping immigrants, it was about sending a message. That message collided headfirst with Judge Boasberg's courtroom. Legal experts warned that using such an outdated law without clear wartime conditions set a dangerous precedent. Boasberg's ruling to block the deportations stunned the White House, which expected resistance, but perhaps not this quickly and not this decisively. The judge's decision was rooted in constitutional concerns, including due process rights and the overreach of executive power. What had started as a legal maneuver by the Trump administration now spiraled into a national debate on law, leadership, and the limits of power. The pieces were on the board, and the clash was only just beginning. The turning point came quietly, but forcefully, from inside a federal courtroom. In a detailed ruling that sent shockwaves through Washington, Judge James Boasberg ordered an immediate halt to the deportations authorized under the Alien Enemies Act. The case, brought forward by civil liberties groups on behalf of Venezuelan nationals, challenged the Trump administration's attempt to use the centuries-old law as a fast-track mechanism to remove migrants accused, often without clear evidence, of gang affiliations. Boasberg, citing serious due process concerns, ruled that the administration's actions risked violating the constitutional rights of individuals who had not been given a fair chance to defend themselves. The decision was grounded in the fundamental principles of American law: fairness, clarity, and individual rights. Boasberg emphasized that the Alien Enemies Act, while still technically valid, was never intended to be used in peacetime or in vague, sweeping actions against individuals from a country that the United States is not formally at war with. He noted that many of the deportation orders were issued with little or no legal representation for the accused and without proper hearings, clear violations of the Fifth Amendment's guarantee of due process. In his carefully worded opinion, the judge wrote that executive authority, even in matters of national security, must operate within the bounds of the Constitution. It was a bold assertion of judicial power, one that challenged the administration's narrative and its strategy of pushing legal limits. President Trump did not take the ruling quietly. Speaking at a rally the following day, he launched a full-scale verbal assault on Boasberg, calling him an unelected troublemaker who was putting American lives at risk to protect criminals. The crowd erupted in cheers as Trump vowed to fight back and accused the judiciary of being stacked with activist judges trying to undermine his presidency. On social media, the president doubled down, posting in all caps, "We cannot let one judge stop U.S. from protecting our country." It wasn't the first time Trump had criticized the courts, but this time felt different. There was a deeper level of frustration and perhaps fear as the legal system stood firmly in his way. The administration didn't stop with rhetoric. Almost immediately, legal advisors began exploring ways to bypass Boasberg's ruling. Reports from Axios and other outlets indicated that Trump's legal team was considering reclassifying the deportation orders under different legal frameworks, hoping to sidestep the judge's decision. There were also whispers of expanding the use of executive emergency powers or seeking a fast-track appeal to a higher court. At the same time, Homeland Security officials quietly continued to detain and process Venezuelan migrants, raising alarm among advocacy groups who feared the administration was ignoring the court's order altogether. Behind the scenes, tensions mounted. Legal experts warned that any attempt to openly defy a federal court ruling could trigger a constitutional crisis. Members of Congress began to weigh in, some siding with the president's tough-on-crime stance, others expressing deep concern about the erosion of judicial authority. Meanwhile, Judge Boasberg maintained his silence publicly, as a standard for members of the bench, but issued a written reminder that any violation of his order would carry significant legal consequences. The clash was no longer just a courtroom dispute. It had become a national showdown over the limits of presidential power, the independence of the judiciary, and the future of American democracy. One man wielded the executive pen, the other a gavel. And with the nation watching closely, neither seemed willing to back down. Judge Boasberg's next move stunned even seasoned political observers and legal analysts. When reports began surfacing that federal agents were still proceeding with deportations in defiance of his court order, the judge took a step rarely seen in modern judicial proceedings. He opened the door to holding senior Trump administration officials in contempt of court. In a sharply worded judicial notice, Boasberg demanded answers from the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He gave them 48 hours to provide written documentation showing compliance with the ruling or face the possibility of contempt proceedings. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Boasberg called an emergency hearing. Representatives from the Justice Department appeared visibly uneasy, asked by the judge to explain why individuals under his protection had been transferred to deportation facilities even after the order had been issued. The law is not a suggestion, Boasberg declared from the bench. It is an obligation, and compliance is not optional, regardless of the office one holds. Though Boasberg never directly named President Trump during the proceedings, his intent was unmistakable. The judge was willing to hold cabinet-level officials, and potentially the executive branch itself, accountable for ignoring the rule of law. The move sparked a media firestorm. Politico, The Washington Post, and ABC News published detailed reports analyzing the potential fallout of contempt charges. Boasberg, they noted, was well within his legal authority. Contempt of court is one of the judiciary's most powerful tools, a mechanism that can lead to fines, injunctions, and even imprisonment for those who defy court orders. While it is rarely used against top government officials, legal experts agree that in this case, the judge had cause. The Guardian described Boasberg's action as a quiet but seismic assertion of judicial independence in the face of unchecked power. But it wasn't just in the courtroom that Boasberg made his mark. In a rare move, the judge published a supplemental legal opinion to his original ruling, while maintaining judicial decorum and refraining from overt political commentary. The opinion emphasized the importance of the separation of powers. No branch of government, Boasberg wrote, possesses the privilege to place itself above constitutional limits. The judiciary's role is not to bend to executive pressure, but to uphold the framework upon which this republic stands. The statement, though measured in tone, carried the force of history. It invoked the legacy of landmark decisions where courts had checked executive excess, from Watergate to the Muslim travel ban, and made clear that this was no different. The response from the legal community was swift and overwhelming. Legal scholars across the ideological spectrum praised Boasberg's actions as courageous and principled. The American Bar Association issued a formal statement defending the judge, stating, "Judicial independence is a pillar of our democracy. Efforts to intimidate or undermine judges not only threaten the law, but also the freedoms it protects." Harvard constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe wrote on X, "Judge Boasberg is not merely upholding precedent. He's defending the very idea that America is a nation of laws, not of men." Even some conservative voices, including commentators on Fox News, expressed concern about the Trump administration's aggressive tactics, with one analyst noting, "We've crossed into very dangerous territory if court orders are treated like political opinions." Meanwhile, Trump and his allies responded with characteristic defiance. White House spokespersons denied any wrongdoing, insisting that federal agencies were acting within their discretion and suggesting the judge had overstepped his bounds. Trump, during another rally, referred to Boasberg as one of those liberal judges who thinks he runs the country. But this time, his rhetoric seemed less triumphant. The administration was beginning to feel the weight of legal pressure, and cracks were appearing in its strategy. Judge Boasberg, for his part, remained silent outside his rulings. He allowed his written opinions and courtroom authority to speak for him. Yet to many Americans, his actions delivered a louder message than any press conference could, that no one, not even a president, is above the law. In an age of political chaos and blurred boundaries, the image of a federal judge calmly defending constitutional principles became a defining moment in the confrontation. As contempt proceedings loomed, the battle between the gavel and the executive pen edged closer to a full-blown constitutional showdown. Chief Justice John Roberts, known for his typically reserved and cautious approach to public statements, surprised many when he weighed in on the escalating conflict between President Trump and the judiciary. Following a series of harsh remarks from the president, who had repeatedly attacked the impartiality of federal judges, including Judge Boasberg, Roberts issued a rare and pointed public rebuke. His statement, delivered through a spokesperson, was succinct but powerful. "We do not have Obama judges or Trump judges, Bush judges or Clinton judges. What we have is an extraordinary group of dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them. That independent judiciary is something we should all be thankful for." The statement was significant not only because it came from the highest-ranking judge in the country, but also due to its rare public nature. Historically, Roberts and other members of the Supreme Court have refrained from commenting on the political battles or controversies surrounding the judiciary. However, with Trump's relentless attacks on federal judges and his insinuation that they were acting politically rather than impartially, Roberts felt compelled to defend the very core of American democracy, the independence of the judiciary. Roberts' comments carried immense weight. As Chief Justice of the United States, his words held profound significance in affirming the judiciary's role as a neutral arbiter in the face of political pressures. The judiciary, after all, is the branch of government entrusted with ensuring that the law is applied fairly and consistently, free from external influence or political bias. By defending this principle, Roberts was not only standing up for Judge Boasberg, but also sending a message to the country and the world that the judiciary would not bend to political whims. The Chief Justice's intervention had significant implications for the separation of powers, a foundational concept of American governance. The Constitution's design intentionally distributes power among the three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, so that no one branch can dominate the others. The executive, headed by the president, is powerful, but it is not above the law or the Constitution. When President Trump publicly criticized judges and threatened to undermine the judicial branch's authority, Roberts' statement served as a reminder that the judiciary's role is to act as a check on executive power. By asserting the judiciary's independence, Roberts emphasized that the separation of powers was non-negotiable. In his statement, he underscored that the judicial branch would not be swayed by political rhetoric or external pressure. This intervention marked a critical moment in the battle for the future of American democracy, especially as the Trump administration tested the boundaries of executive power. For many Americans, Roberts' intervention was a moment of clarity, a reaffirmation of the idea that the rule of law would prevail even in times of deep political polarization. It was a reminder that while the president holds immense power, he cannot dictate the outcomes of court cases or control the actions of the judiciary. In defending the impartiality of the courts, Roberts ensured that the principles of fairness, justice, and constitutional governance would continue to guide the nation's legal framework. The clash between President Trump and Judge James Boasberg, coupled with Chief Justice John Roberts' rare public defense of judicial independence, dominated headlines and sparked intense debates across the media landscape. The coverage of this escalating tension revealed the deep divisions within the media, with various outlets offering sharply contrasting perspectives. The media response to the conflict reflected the polarized nature of American politics. Outlets with a more liberal or progressive tilt, such as the New York Times and The Guardian, focused on the threat Trump posed to judicial independence. They framed the confrontation as part of a broader pattern of Trump's attempts to undermine democratic institutions. These publications highlighted Boasberg's ruling as a courageous stand against an administration that was willing to flout the law to pursue its agenda. The Guardian noted that the judge's actions were a powerful reminder of the checks and balances embedded in the U.S. Constitution, with one article even declaring that Boasberg's decision to hold Trump officials in contempt was a watershed moment for American democracy. Similarly, the New York Times emphasized the importance of judicial independence in its coverage, framing the incident as a critical test of the judiciary's ability to stand up to executive overreach. On the other hand, more conservative outlets, such as Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, took a decidedly different tone. These outlets often focused on the perceived overreach of Judge Boasberg and questioned whether the judiciary was becoming too politicized. Fox News commentators voiced support for President Trump, accusing the judge of acting in a politically motivated manner and framing his ruling as a challenge to the will of the people. One analysis suggested that the legal decision was a thinly veiled attempt by liberal judges to thwart the administration's agenda, portraying Boasberg as a judicial activist. In contrast, the Wall Street Journal was less overtly political but expressed concern over the implications of the judge's ruling, suggesting that it could lead to a dangerous precedent where courts dictate the terms of executive policy. While the tone varied, almost every major outlet agreed that the showdown between the executive and judicial branches was one of the most consequential political clashes in recent years. The coverage was comprehensive, with live updates, op-eds, and expert commentary dissecting every aspect of the dispute. As the drama unfolded, reporters noted that this case would likely be studied in law schools for decades as a pivotal moment in the history of the U.S. legal system. Public opinion on the conflict was deeply divided, reflecting the broader partisan divide that has characterized much of President Trump's presidency. A poll conducted by Gallup following the Chief Justice's remarks revealed that 53% of Americans supported the judiciary's independence and viewed Boasberg's actions as a necessary check on executive power. However, the same poll indicated that a significant portion of Trump's base, approximately 45%, sympathized with the president's criticisms of the judge, with many seeing it as a reflection of Trump's tough stance on immigration and law enforcement. Social media, as always, played a central role in shaping public discourse. On platforms like Twitter and Facebook, hashtags such as hashtag Defend the Judiciary and hashtag Trump versus Boasberg trended for days. Supporters of Judge Boasberg hailed him as a hero, praising his defense of the rule of law. Tweets from prominent legal figures and activists cheered his commitment to maintaining judicial integrity, while political commentators used the hashtag to call for greater transparency in how the judiciary handles political cases. Legal experts weighed in, asserting that the judge was simply doing his job by ensuring that the law was followed, regardless of political pressure. On the other side of the debate, Trump supporters on social media expressed outrage over what they saw as judicial interference in the executive's prerogative. Many took to Twitter to accuse Boasberg of overstepping his authority, accusing the judge of being a puppet of the left. The hashtag Boasberg overreach quickly gained traction, with conservative pundits amplifying the narrative that the judiciary was being weaponized against the president. The political fallout from the clash was swift. Democrats, particularly those in the House of Representatives, rallied behind Judge Boasberg and Chief Justice Roberts. Speaker Nancy Pelosi issued a statement praising the judiciary's role in maintaining the balance of power. In our democracy, no one is above the law, not even the president. Judge Boasberg's decision and Chief Justice Roberts' remarks remind us that our system of checks and balances remains intact, Pelosi stated. Progressive lawmakers like Senator Elizabeth Warren also publicly supported the judiciary, with Warren tweeting, "The rule of law must always prevail over political power." On the Republican side, reactions were more mixed. Some GOP lawmakers aligned with President Trump, echoing his criticisms of the judge and claiming that the judiciary was becoming overly politicized. Senator Lindsey Graham, a close ally of the president, expressed his concerns, suggesting that Boasberg's ruling undermined the president's ability to enforce immigration policies. Judges should not be blocking the will of the people, Graham remarked, adding that Trump had a constitutional duty to protect the nation's borders. However, other Republicans, particularly those in more moderate or independent-leaning districts, took a more cautious approach. They refrained from fully supporting the president's attacks on the judiciary and instead focused on the need for a fair and impartial legal process. Senator Mitt Romney, for example, called for a balanced approach, warning that undermining judicial independence could have long-term negative consequences for the country's governance. In the House, a few Republican members expressed concern over the increasing tensions between the branches of government. While they did not directly oppose the president, they warned that the ongoing clash could harm the public's trust in the democratic process and institutions. These members called for more dialogue between the branches to avoid a breakdown in governance. Overall, the media and political responses to the clash between Trump and Judge Boasberg revealed the deep divides in American political life, with sharp differences of opinion on the role of the judiciary and the power of the executive branch. As the conflict continued to unfold, it seemed clear that this was not just a legal battle. It was a political and ideological confrontation that would have lasting ramifications for the future of American democracy. The confrontation between President Trump and Judge James Boasberg, along with the broader involvement of Chief Justice John Roberts, carries profound implications for the concept of judicial independence in the United States. The clash has ignited debates about the autonomy of the judiciary and its ability to remain impartial in the face of executive pressure. In recent years, there has been growing concern about the erosion of democratic norms, and this incident starkly illustrated how the balance of power between the executive and judiciary can be threatened by political forces. Judicial independence, a cornerstone of American democracy, is designed to ensure that judges can make decisions based on the law, free from political interference or pressure. This incident placed a spotlight on how this principle is being challenged in a modern political environment, where presidents have increasingly sought to exert control over all branches of government. President Trump's attack on Judge Boasberg, labeling him as an unelected troublemaker, seemed to undermine the very fabric of judicial impartiality. For many, this was not just a personal attack on one judge, but a broader attempt to delegitimize the judiciary as a whole. The fact that Judge Boasberg's decision was viewed as a direct rebuke of the administration's immigration policy added fuel to the fire. The public response to these events, especially the legal community's support for Boasberg, reinforced the idea that attacks on judicial independence cannot be tolerated. In the wake of this clash, the perception of judicial independence has been further polarized. Legal scholars, political analysts, and many citizens argue that this event serves as a stark reminder of the need to protect the judiciary from political manipulation. The role of the courts in checking the power of the executive is critical to maintaining the constitutional balance. Public support for judicial independence has grown in the wake of this conflict, with many recognizing that the judiciary must be insulated from political pressures to ensure fairness and justice. The confrontation also raises critical questions about the boundaries of executive power. The U.S. Constitution outlines the separation of powers, with clear delineations between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Executive authority is not absolute, and this incident underscores the importance of maintaining a system of checks and balances. In this case, the judiciary acted as a check on the executive's authority to enforce immigration policies, specifically those related to deportations. Judge Boasberg's decision to halt deportations under the Alien Enemies Act was based on the principle that the government must adhere to due process, ensuring that individuals are not arbitrarily deprived of their rights. The administration's response to the ruling, attempting to bypass the court's decision, further highlighted the tension between the branches and the limits of executive power. This situation serves as a reminder of the ongoing tension between executive power and the checks and balances built into the Constitution. Throughout U.S. history, presidents have occasionally clashed with the judiciary over the limits of their authority. One of the most famous examples is the 1803 case of Marbury versus Madison, where the Supreme Court, under Chief Justice John Marshall, asserted the judiciary's power to review acts of Congress and the executive. More recently, the Watergate scandal in the 1970s saw President Nixon in direct conflict with the judiciary as the courts ruled against his efforts to withhold evidence. Similarly, the conflict between President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the Supreme Court in the 1930s over the New Deal programs serves as another historical example where the executive sought to bypass judicial oversight. These incidents demonstrate that tensions between the president and the courts are not new, but the stakes have become higher as political polarization has deepened. The current clash, however, is notable for its public nature and the frequency with which President Trump has attacked the judiciary. His ongoing criticisms, particularly aimed at judges he perceives as opposing his policies, have brought this issue to the forefront in a way that previous administrations have not. In the past, clashes between presidents and the judiciary, while significant, often played out behind closed doors or in less public forums. The Trump administration's direct, public engagement in these conflicts, amplified by social media and the 24-hour news cycle, has made these issues more visible to the general public, further polarizing public opinion on the role of the judiciary. In conclusion, the broader implications of the clash between President Trump and Judge Boasberg go beyond the immediate legal dispute. It has ignited a national conversation about the importance of judicial independence, the limits of executive power, and the role of checks and balances in preserving the integrity of the U.S. democratic system. This confrontation will likely serve as a case study for years to come, illustrating the fragility of the separation of powers and the need for vigilance in defending the independence of the judiciary. As the country grapples with these issues, the legal community and the public alike will be watching closely to see how this conflict ultimately shapes the future of American governance. The conflict between President Trump and Judge James Boasberg over immigration policy and judicial independence has been a pivotal moment in American governance. The president's attempt to bypass a court ruling on deportations, using the Alien Enemies Act, set off a dramatic series of events, including threats of contempt proceedings against Trump officials. Chief Justice John Roberts also intervened to defend judicial impartiality, marking a significant moment in the ongoing tension between the executive and judicial branches. This incident highlights the crucial importance of maintaining judicial independence, a cornerstone of the U.S. Constitution. The clash served as a stark reminder of the delicate balance of power between the branches of government, with the judiciary acting as a check on executive overreach. The broader implications of this conflict will continue to shape the public's perception of the separation of powers and the integrity of the rule of law. As viewers, it's important to stay informed about these developments, as the future of judicial independence and executive authority hangs in the balance. By engaging in discussions about the separation of powers, we can better understand the forces shaping our democracy and ensure the continued protection of our constitutional principles. Stay engaged and informed. Your voice matters.